Welcome to the channel and welcome to my review of Codex Tyranids, up for pre-order now and available to purchase on Saturday the 11th of November. There are no new models in this book and very few points changes as well, not very significant. It's not like Codex Eldar where you have to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb because everything's changed. It's pretty much the same. Some things have gone down a little bit, a couple of things have gone up. But no new models. There is a slight shift in the narrative which is very interesting. They talk about the Great Rift and the Octavius system. It's moved slightly away from the total destruction, the annihilation of the galaxy that they used to suggest in previous Tyranid codexes. In this case, it's brought it more up to date with what's happening after the coming of the Great Rift. I particularly like the open threads in the narrative. After the coming of the Great Rift, Hive Fleet Leviathan has been split into thousands of little pieces spread across the galaxy, some closer, some further away. There's a great scattering after Octarius as well, so lots of open threads and interesting possibilities for Games Workshop to go big or go in different locations with the Tyranids that they've never been to before, and lots of open threads for them to deliver newer models in the future. I can see this narrative unfolding. I like it. The main changes in this book come from the core rules. Changes to the core rules such as Synapse, Instinctive Behavior and Shadow and the Warp come from the changes to some of the data sheets, which some of the changes are significant. I mean, Carnufex is hitting on a 3 rather than a 4 when they shoot. Dakafexes are back. Venom Thrope's got quite a nice boost, and this Tyrannofex, the big Rapture cannon on the Tyrannofex, is very, very mean all of a sudden, and they can chuck out more shots. So some of the big nasties in here got a bit meaner, core rules changed, and of course you've got relics and stratagems. So because there haven't been very many points changes, I don't expect to get more bang for your buck, but the shape of Tyranid armies in the future will probably change because of the core abilities shifting, and because some of these data sheets have got mean, and because of the stratagems. So let's look at some of these core things. Let's look at Instinctive Behavior, Synapse and Shadow in the Warp. So Instinctive Behavior really isn't a thing anymore. If you want to shoot and charge the closest enemy unit all the time, Instinctive Behavior will never affect you. If you're outside of 24 inches of Synapse range, you have to subtract 1 for hit rolls when shooting any target other than the nearest visible enemy, and subtract 2 from charging if you declare a charge against any unit other than the nearest enemy unit. Basically 24 inches now, you can shoot and charge, do whatever you want. Outside of 24 inches, there's a slight nerf if you want to shoot and charge something that's not the closest enemy unit, and 24 inches is big. You can put a Synapse creature in the middle of the table in the reach of that bubble. That's a 48-inch bubble all around there. So Instinctive Behaviors is not really a thing, I don't think. Shadow in the Warp has gone to 18 inches. Enemy psychers must subtract 1 from any psychic tests when they are within 18 inches of any units with this ability. Tyranid psychers are not affected. And Synapse has gone out to 12 inches. Synapse is fearless, so essentially if you've got any Tyranid monsters within, any Tyranid creatures at all, within 12 inches of a Synapse creature, they're fearless. So that gives you a lot more mobility, a lot more flexibility on the battlefield. Instinctive Behavior being hardly a thing and Synapse being much, much bigger allows you to stretch out much further than before. And then there are the other 2 core rules, the extensions of the hive mind. So basically, so long as you bring a battle-forged army that only includes Tyranid detachments, you get objectives secured from your troops choices, and Hive Fleet Adaptions. There are 7 types of Hive Fleet Adaptions. 3 of them really stand out. The best, I think, is Hive Fleet Kraken. Questing Tendrils. Basically, units can fall back and charge in the same turn. Also, when they advance, roll 3 dice and pick the highest. Remember, Gene Stealers can move, advance and charge, and with the Swarmlord boosting them all the way across the table as well. Falling back and charging again, I guess that's nasty. So previously, one of the defensive mechanisms against Tyranids is lock up. You could get in there with a big bug with a large mob of boys or 10 dudes and hold up the big bug so it won't shoot and rampage on through your army. But now you're a NID player, you can fall back, turn around, charge again. Kraken stands out to me. The other 2 that stand out to me are Jormungandr. I'm saying that wrong. I know I'm going to get flamed, but Jormungandr. A unit with this adaptation always has the benefit of cover for the purposes of shooting attacks. If the unit advances or charges, however, it loses the benefit of this adaptation until the start of your next turn. So it does two things to you here. One, when you're advancing up the battle grid, your little bugs are going to finally have a meaningful save. Instead of a 6-up, they're going to have a 5-up save, so long as they're not advancing all the way across the battlefield. And your Dakafexes and the stuff in the backfield, Exocrines, they're going to be getting a 2-up save because they're not moving, right? They're standing still and shooting all the time. Particularly when you can have minuses to hit them as well, because you've got your Venom Ropes back there. I think it's the Venom Ropes, the one that nerf shooting attacks. So you can imagine Exocrines in the backfield with a 2-up save because they're Jormungandr, and minuses to hit them because there's a Venom Rope stood nearby. That's those combinations are mean. And the other one that I particularly like as well is Kronos, the Bio Barrage. So Hive Fleet Adaptation Kronos, which is re-roll hit rolls of 1 for units with this adaptation in the shooting phase if they did not move in the preceding movement phase. So if you want Exocrines or Carnufexes in the backfield, or Carnufexes with the, I think it's the heavy venom cannon, which is the 36-inch range gun. If you want to have a gun line of monstrous tanks at the back of the battlefield, typically hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1s, you can, but there's an upgrade you can give to a Carnufex, which means it's hitting on 3s now. And those 3 to me stand out as the best Hive Fleet adaptations. Or at least the 3 Hive Fleet adaptations that I don't particularly want to face. But the other 4 aren't bad either. Hive Fleet Behemoth, rerolls failed charges. Army-wide, reroll failed charges. That's pretty good. Leviathan. Leviathan basically gets 6-up feel no pain. Every time you lose a wound, so long as you're within 6 inches of a synapse unit, you get a 6-up feel no pain. It doesn't stack with Catalyst, but that's nice because Catalyst you can only chuck on 1 unit, right? In match play games, you can only give 1 unit a 5-up feel no pain. Now having everything in your army, a 16.6% chance of staying alive, so long as they're within synapse range. And remember, you can use this on mortal wounds as well. So that's pretty good as well. Gorgon, Hive Fleet Adaptation Gorgon, reroll wound rolls of 1 in the fight phase. That's okay. If you're going for health or lever for the scary Nid attack, lots and lots and lots of Gene Stealers and Hormagaunts, then reroll wound rolls of 1 in the fight phase for your entire army is good. And Hydra Swarming Instincts reroll hit rolls. Reroll all hit rolls for units in the fight phase. Fight phase only. So long as the target unit contains fewer models than your own. So your big bugs won't benefit them so much. But if you're bringing endless swarms of Hormagaunts and Gene Stealers, then Hydra is probably the one for you. And rerolling all hit rolls in the fight phase. And you know how many hit rolls Gene Stealers throw out? That's crazy. My main feel for these Hive Fleet adaptations are, whereas some of the other codexes have been a bit hit and miss, there's been some clear winners, such as the Alpha Legion 1, things like that in previous books. All of these, to my mind, are good. Depending on how you want to build your army. If you're a swarm across the battlefield with lots of bugs, then you're going to pick a certain one. If you're a shooty, DACA type of list, then you're going to pick a certain one. All of them are good, and I think some of them really, really stand out. I like them. I like the fact, to my mind, there isn't one of them in here which you go, oh, that sucks. No one is ever going to take that. I can see people taking and choosing them for various reasons, depending on their army build. I like it. So let's stack that with some of the stratagems. I'll not go through every single stratagem. There are 3 pages of them in here though. But let's just look at some of the standout ones. So for 1 command point, Psychic Barrage. Use this stratagem in your psychic phase if a Zoanthropes unit from your army consisting of at least 3 models is within 6 inches of 2 other such units. So you need 9 Zoanthropes to do this. But it costs a command point. If you do so, they don't take any psychic tests. They select a point on the battlefield within 18 inches and visible to all 3 units, and you roll a dice and add 1 to the result of the test if the unit being rolled for is 10 or more models within. So pick a point on the battlefield, and if there's a couple of units within 3 inches and they've got 10 or more models, then you add 1 to this dice roll, and on a 4-up, those units take 3d3 mortal wounds. That's 3 to 9 mortal wounds for 1 command point. Yes, you're going to need 9 zoanthropes to do it, but I haven't seen anything yet in any of the codexes which allow someone to do 3d3 mortal wounds, except for maybe Titan weapons or something. That's a very interesting one. Can't see anyone ever using it, but 3d3 mortal wounds. Bring your zoanthropes. I like it. Rapid Regeneration, 2 command points. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Select a Tyranid model. It regains d3 wounds. Done. So you could do that 1 turn, and then next turn do it again, and next turn do it again. Suddenly you've got a Tech Priest ability for your big bugs. It does cost 2 command points, but it's a way of keeping Swarmy or a very critical unit alive that might be sat on an objective somewhere, a big bug on an objective somewhere. d3 mortal wounds. Let's look at some of the abilities you're very likely to use. Metabolic Override, 1 command point. Use this stratagem in your movement phase. After moving a Tyranid's unit from your army, you can make a second move with that unit, including advancing if you wish. But when you do so, you must roll a dice for each model in the unit, and on a roll of 1, inflict a mortal wound on the unit. For each roll of 1, inflict a mortal wound on the unit. So if you're moving 20 bugs, that's 20 dice you're going to have to roll. And you're probably going to use some from that unit, because on 1s you're going to be inflicting mortal wounds. The unit cannot shoot or charge when it does this, but being able to shift for a command point some bugs all the way up the table, very nice. 1 point, Pheromone Trail. So long as you've got a Lichter on the battlefield, you can stick a Tyranid's infantry unit in your army in reinforcements off the battlefield. And you can set this unit up wholly within 6 inches of the Lichter and more than 9 inches away from enemy models, rather than following the normal rules for setting up the unit. Remember, Lichters have that hidden hunter rule, so they deploy, during deployment you stick them anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy models. And if you wanted a unit of Gene Stealers down with them, because it's any Tyranid's infantry unit or a unit of lots and lots of bugs down with them, pay a command point, and suddenly you've got them with the Lichter way up the battle grid. Another thing to note is that this happens before battle rounds, so even in matched play games, you could play this one again and again and again. If you have 3 different Lichters, you could set up 3 different units of Tyranid's infantry way up the board if you wanted to, so long as they're within 6 inches of Lichter and 9 inches away from enemy models. Another one you're very likely to use, 1 command point, Overrun. Use this stratagem when a Tyranid's unit, any Tyranid's unit from your army, destroys a unit in the fight phase and is not within 3 inches of another enemy unit. Instead of consolidating, that unit can move and advance as if it was your movement phase. It can't end up within an inch of enemy models as well, so if the Swarm Lord or if something big and nasty has just killed something, you can suddenly move it and advance it, but without locking up an enemy unit. Another boost to the right or boost to the left or boost into cover if you want to. Talking about Swarmy or one of your characters, for 1 command point, Ferocious Appetite. When a Tyranid's monster or character from your army is chosen to attack, you can reroll all failed wound rolls until the end of the phase. Only a command point. Nice. 1 command point, Feed a Tendrils. When a Gene Stealer, Lichter, Toxicrene or Venom Throat from your army kills a character in the fight phase, so any Gene Stealer, Lichter, Toxicrene or Venom Throat, so one of those 4 things, and it's got to be a character, so it's difficult to pull off, but you spend a command point and you gain d3 command points. Let's look at some of the more expensive stratagems. 2 command points, Single-Minded Annihilation. Pick a Tyranid infantry unit for 2 command points, and that unit can shoot again. 2 command points, Pathogenic Slime. Use this stratagem in your shooting phase. Select a Tyranid's monster from your army and increase the damage of its attacks by 1 for this phase. Just damage of its attack, so nice. 3 command points, Spore Field. Use this stratagem after both armies have deployed, but before the battle begins, and you can add up to 2 units of Spore Mines to your army as reinforcements and set them up anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 12 inches away from enemy models. Death Frenzy for 2 command points. Select a Tyranid's character, Old One Eye, the Swarm Lord, something like that. When they die, they can immediately shoot as if it were your shooting phase or fight as if it were your fight phase before it's removed from the battlefield. For 2 command points. 3 command points. Adrenaline Surge. Pick any Tyranids unit. At the end of the fight phase, it can fight again. Call in the Brood. Call in the Brood for 3 command points. At the end of your movement phase, add a new unit of 5 Gene Stealers to your army and set them up as reinforcements wholly within 6 inches of a Broodlord or Infestation node from your army and more than 9 inches away from enemy models. 3 command points for 3 free Gene Stealers. Or for 2 command points, Endless Swarm. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Select a unit of Termagants, Hormagaunts or Gargoyles or any Hydra infantry unit from your army that has been completely destroyed. So you don't have to have Hydra. Basically, it's Termagants, Hormagaunts, or Gargoyles if you're any other kind of high fleet. But a high fleet Hydra can take anyone they want, any infantry unit. Select a unit that's basically been completely destroyed and add an identical unit to your army, set up as reinforcements wholly within 9 inches of a board edge and more than 9 inches from enemy models. It does say within 6 inches of any board edge. So that could be coming on from behind your enemy lines if you want to. For 2 command points, Endless Swarm. I can see that one being used once or twice. In the Psychic Powers, we've got the Horror, Catalyst and Onslaught, as we always did. And Dominion is now back, has a warp charge value of 5. If manifested, select a Tyranid unit within 36 inches of the Psyker that has the Instinctive Behavior ability. Until the end of your next Psychic phase, that unit ignores the Instinctive Behavior ability and automatically passes morale tests. So, yeah, if you don't want to break, say there's a unit of bugs with objective secured and it's outside a synapse range and it's just been smacked a lot, and you know you're going to lose a bunch more creatures because it's outside a synapse range, so it's not fearless anymore and it's game turn 5, cast Dominion on them. It's a 36-inch psychic power and they'll pass that morale test. They'll stay there and potentially score you that objective. Paroxysm is back, has a warp charge value of 5, and if manifested, choose an enemy unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. Until your next Psychic phase, that unit cannot charge in the fight phase until all other units have been able to do so. And when I say charge, I mean fight. So Paroxysm nerfs something that's definitely going to smack you first and stop it so it fights last, and then eat it first. And then Psychic Scream has a warp charge value of 5, and it's got an 18-inch range and it targets the nearest enemy unit, and that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So Psychic Scream is essentially exactly like Smite. Warp charge value of 5, 18-inch range, D3 mortal wounds, but if that unit is a Psyker, you roll 2 dice. If the result is higher than their leadership characteristic, randomly select one of their psychic powers and eat it. They can no longer use it. So why bother with Psychic Scream if you're just smiting? Well, imagine you've got a Psyker that can do 2 psychic powers. You could smite, D3 mortal wounds, and then Psychic Scream, D3 more mortal wounds. Yeah, I could see them both going boom, boom. Doubling the fun that we have with Smite, because everyone likes Smite. So those are the psychic powers. Onto Relics Bio Artifacts, of course, they're not relics. So as with the other books, there's some pimped weapons in here. The Scythes of Tyrant, Slimer Maggot Infestation, Miasma Cannon. This weapon automatically hits the target if it's within 18 inches, and it always wounds targets other than vehicles on a 2-up. That one's quite nice. And because it's a strength 9, AP -2 with a 3-up damage profile. So that one's pretty good. But some of the classics are back, such as the Reaper of Obliterax. Models with a lash whip and bone sword only. And on a wound roll of 6, this weapon inflicts double damage. Chameleonic Mutation, Kraken model only, and your opponent must subtract 1 from all hit rolls for ranged weapons that target this model. So that'd be a good one to put on your Flying Hive Tyrant, -1 to hit, like a normal flyer, like other flyers, which Flying Hive Tyrants don't have that hard to hit rule. Well, with this they would have. Gorgon has hyper-adaptive biology. From the end of the first phase, in which this model suffers any wounds, add 1 to its toughness for the remainder of the battle. But as these ones are Hive Fleet specific, I think the go-to one will probably be the Yumgal factor. That's that old Gene Stealer name. So you've had some Yumgal Gene Stealers, saying it wrong, that have been reconsumed by the Hive Fleet, and every time this model fights you roll a d3. And on a 1 they get +1 strength, on a 2 they get +1 attack, and on a 3 they get +1 toughness. So I can see +1 attack or +1 toughness on your big bug being very useful, whichever one of those that you get. But I don't see any crazy good ones there, unless I'm missing some synergy, but there probably is some synergy. You'll pick one of these things and add it to something later on with a certain psychic power, and suddenly some relic goes through the roof. But I can't see one in here that allows you to steal command points back again, or generate your own command points, as a certain army can do. So I won't go through them all because they're a bit meh as far as I can tell. Warlord Traits, Alien Cunning. At the start of the first battle round, but before the first turn begins, you can pick up your Warlord and deploy them again. Brilliant. Heightened Senses. Your Warlord never suffers any penalties to their hit rolls, except on Overwatch when they only hit on 6s, but you can't nerf them. So they're not hitting on, the Alpha Legion stuff, which is -1 to hit, things like that. Their Heightened Senses will negate that. Synaptic Linchpin adds 6 inches to the range of the Warlord Synapse ability. I think that would have been a go-to one, only that Synapse has gone up to 12 inches now. I don't know if that's going to come into, Synapse is going to come into as much effect as it did before. I imagine most Tyranid players there are used to playing with their army as a very tight ball, or balls within balls, lots of balls. So yeah, having 6 inches to the range of the Warlord Synapse ability, perhaps not as critical as once it was. Mind Eater is number 4. Each time your Warlord slays an enemy character in the fight phase, at the end of the phase, the unit can move and advance if you wish, as if it was your movement phase. That's pretty fruity. Instinctive Killer is the best one, though. At the beginning of the battle, but before the first turn begins, choose an enemy unit. You can re-roll all failed to hit rolls for the Warlord for attacks that target that unit, or any unit that has the same datasheet. So it gives the example of intercessors, or knobs, for example. So you could pick intercessors, and your Warlord will re-roll hit rolls every time it goes up against intercessors. Or pick, I don't know, Craftworld something. So you can look across the battlefield and see what your army, what your opponent's got. And if they're bringing lots of unit X, you can say, well, I'm going to have re-roll hit rolls against everything with that datasheet. Number 6, Adaptive Biology. From the end of the first phase in which your Warlord suffers a wound, for the remainder of the battle, when inflicting damage on your Warlord, reduce all the damage of any attack by 1 to a minimum of 1. Okay, that's the new best one. As soon as he's taken a wound, -1 to all the damage that are coming in at him. So all those damage 2 weapons are only doing damage 1. Any damage 3 weapons is only doing damage 2. Las cannons potentially minusing 1 to their d6 rolls. You've got to lose a wound first beforehand. But yeah, there's no 6 up feel no pain in here. +1 toughness and 6 up feel no pain that you've got in some of the other codexes. But I guess Adaptive Biology more than makes up for it, because Tyranid characters tend to have a lot of wounds rather than just 4 or 5. So the Hive Fleet Warlord Traits, each time Behemoth, each time you make a wound roll of 6 for the Warlord in the fight phase, that attack inflicts 1 additional damage. Kraken, 1 step ahead. In the fight phase, you can pick 1 friendly Kraken unit within 6 inches of your Warlord. That unit can fight first in the fight phase, even if it didn't charge. Leviathan, perfectly adapted. Once per battle round, you can re-roll a single hit, wound, damage, advance, charge, or saving throw made for your Warlord. That's pretty good, because you can do it every battle round. But it says or, so it's one of them, not all of them. Gorgon, Lethal Miasma. At the end of the fight phase, roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 1 inch of your Warlord. On a 4-up, they suffer mortal wounds. Jormungandr, Insidious Threat. Enemy units never gain any bonus to their saving throws for being in cover. For attacks made by the Warlord or friendly Hive Fleet units within 3 inches of the Warlord. Hydra, Endless Regeneration. At the beginning of each of your turns, roll a dice for each wound that your Warlord has lost. For each roll of 6, your Warlord regains a wound lost earlier in the battle. Ooh, that one's quite good, isn't it? So your Warlord could have lost 6 wounds, And then you'd pick up 6 dice and roll them all, and on a 6 he regains a wound. And you could do that at the beginning of each of your turns. You could do that in the first turn, in the second turn, in the third turn. Endless regeneration for Hydra. That one's pretty tasty. Kronos, Soul Hunger. Whenever an enemy Psyker fails a psychic test within 18 inches of your Warlord, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. And with Shadow in the Warp having an 18-inch range, minusing 1 to their psychic tests. That's pretty good. Combine that with the stratagem for Kronos, the Deepest Shadow, which is 1 command point. Use this stratagem when an enemy Psyker attempts to manifest a psychic power. So there's Eldrad back there, and he says, I'm manifesting my psychic power, and he's within 24 inches of a Kronos unit from your army, any Kronos unit. Your opponent can only roll a single dice for the psychic test. Not 2 dice, 1 dice, which is -1 for Shadows in the Warp as well. And if he fails, suddenly they suffer D3 mortal wounds. Kronos are going to be pretty good against Grey Knights or against Eldar or against Tzeentch. Any psychic strong army. Basically, if you're out there and you fight a lot of Brimstones, they only roll a dice already, don't they? But if you fight a lot of Tzeentch or Grey Knights or Eldar, then you're probably going to want to pick the Kronos Hive Fleet. So before I dive into the datasheets, I want to have a brief talk about the points, because some things have gone down. You take a look at the book, it gets a little bit confusing in the point section, because the Exocrine has gone up 66 points, and you're like, what is going on there? And then you look at the gun and the armaments that you put on it. The gun is now free, for example. The upgrades, the bits that you put on it are now free. So it's exactly the same as it was. It isn't 66 points more expensive. They've just changed the way you add up the stuff. It's the same with the Harpy. The Harpy's gone up 43 points, but when you add the wings and the Strangleform cannons to it, it's the same points. The Hive Crone, with all the guns on it, has gone up 8 points. Pyrovores are down 4 points. Yeah, it gets a bit confusing. The things that stood out for me is the Trigon down, well, not really stood out. Trigon down 5, Pyrovores down 4, but there's very few changes when you add it all up together. The one that did change, notably, is the Haruspex. Haruspex, probably murdering that one, that name. But I think it's down 48 points once you put the guns on it. And the Hive Crone going up 8 points. I mean, people didn't really take Hive Crones very much anyway. And going up 8 points. There's new units in here. So there's 3 flavors of Carnufexes now. There's Carnufexes, Thornbacks, and Screamer Killers. And Screamer Killers are 90, Thornback 70. So as I said earlier, the points haven't changed significantly. The way the army is going to play will, because of the instinctive behavior and synapse rules, etc. And some of these changes in these data sheets also stand out. The Broodlord is the same, but the Hive Tyrant has taken a bit of a shift. The Hive Tyrants are cheaper now. They're about 10 to 20 points cheaper depending on what you put on them, and their toughness has gone from 6 to 7, and their wounds have gone from 10 to 12. So Hive Tyrants 10 to 20 points cheaper depending on how you load them up, and they're tougher, and they've got more wounds. Hive Tyrants are nice. And they've got a brand new ability called Swooping Assault. During deployment, you can set up a Hive Tyrant with wings circling high above the battlefield instead of placing on the table. And at the end of any of your movement phases, it can swoop down, set it up anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So you can put them in reserve. So yeah, definitely getting a lot more bang for your buck with your Hive Tyrants. The Swarm Lord's in here as well. What I like about the Swarm Lords and the Red Terror and Old One Eye, these are your named characters essentially. These all have the character keyword. In the other books, such as Space Marines, when you've got a character like Marneus Calgar, he belongs to the Ultramarines. When you've got characters like, I don't know, Pask, Tank Commander Pask, he belongs to the Cadians. All the other characters in all the other codexes belong to a specific chapter or army or hive, not hive fleet, craft world. But the Swarm Lord, Old One Eye, the Red Terror, things like that, the characters in here do not belong to a specific hive fleet. So if you have the Swarm Lord, you can put him in Kraken or Behemoth or Leviathan. It doesn't really matter He's not tied to a specific hive fleet. And in the narrative in the book, in the fluff, it tells you why. The characters are a type of creature. They're an apex type of creature available to all hive fleets. And for example, the Swarmlord, it says it appears to be a stress-induced response by the hive fleets. And every now and then, if really, really stressed, any hive fleet will spit out a Swarmlord type character. And I like that because the Tyranids are supposed to be endlessly adapting, right? Endlessly adapting. Overcome any foe. So I like the fact that their characters are not nailed down to a specific chapter or craft world. That adaptability, that variability makes perfect sense to me anyway. So we're old Swarmy, same points as before, but instead of toughness 6, toughness 7. And it says he has base 6 attacks, but he gets an extra attack with his tail. Beforehand it was 7 attacks and he had to make one with his tail. Now it says 6 attacks and he gets an extra attack with the tail. Bone Sabers are now damage 3. They used to be damage D6, exactly the same as before, but instead of damage D6, damage 3. What do you guys think? Did you prefer damage D6 with the Bone Sabers? How many times did you roll 1s and 2s? Well, now the Bone Sabers that he carries do a flat 3 damage. I think I prefer the flat 3 damage. It's just more reliable. I can't see any changes with Tyranid Primes and Termagons, and then we hit the Neurothrope. It's a HQ unit. It's got a power level of 4. I said it was 70 points. And you have the Neurothrope. Spirit Leech, whenever a Neurothrope slays a model using the Smite Psychic Power, it can heal a wound on a friendly Zoanthrope within 6 inches. It has a 3-up invulnerable save, and you can reroll 1s when taking Psychic tests for friendly Hive Fleet Zoanthrope units within 6 inches of this model. Neurothropes can manifest 2 Psychic powers. It's a character, it comes in a unit of 1, and because it's got 5 wounds, it can't be sniped out unless it's getting hit at by snipers. So I can see Neurothropes coming around. It's a nice little addition. Another nice little addition is Old One Eye. Old One Eye used to be 10 wounds, he's gone down to 9, and I like it, because he's a character, and at 10 wounds, he was getting picked on something rotten. Now you have a 9 wound character Carnufex, which can't be picked on, rampaging up towards the lines. So Nid players love bringing Carnufexes. Do you want a Carnufex that the enemy can't shoot at? Bring Old One Eye. Right, on to some troops. Can't see any changes with Tyranid warriors, but Gene Stealers have a brand new rule called Infestation. They've also got extended carapaces as well, which is a brand new rule. Basically, with extended carapaces, you can increase their save characteristic by 4-up. But they lose Swift and Deadly, so they can't charge and advance in the same turn. So you're probably going to always leave it so they can charge and advance in the same turn, and take the extended carapaces off. Anyway, Infestation. If your army includes any units of Gene Stealers, you can put 4 Infestation nodes anywhere in your deployment zone when your army deploys. And you can leave them in there. You can leave your Gene Stealers in reserve. And at any point in the game, as long as it's before game turn 3, of course, they can pop up within 6 inches of the Infestation node. So were your Gene Stealers getting picked on in turn 1 because you were going second and blown off the battle grid and you don't want them picked on? Put down an Infestation mode and leave them off the battle grid. If an enemy model ever gets within 9 inches of one of these Infestation modes, you have to remove it. But remember, you've got 4 of them. And if you remove all of them before the Gene Stealers come onto the battle grid, you lose that unit of Gene Stealers. But it is just a way of hiding them off the table so they don't get shot at. It's nice, it's free, it's there, take it. Ripper Swarms, Tyrant Guard, Hive Guard, things like that don't appear to be changed. And Lichter, Malice. Let's get all the way to the Malice. So the Malice has got a 4-up invulnerable save instead of a 5-up invulnerable save, and instead of manifesting any psychic powers, it had that psychic overload ability. So you roll a dice, and every enemy unit within 6 inches of it could suffer a mortal wound on a 2-up. So you just roll a dice, 2-up, that suffers a mortal wound, that one suffers a mortal wound. Well, now that's changed slightly. If you roll a 6, you get 3 mortal wounds on that unit. It's not D3, just a flat 3. So a 2 up to cause a mortal wound, and on a 6 you get a flat 3, plus your 4 up and vulnerable save. They got good. Next one in the book is the Venom tropes, and I like Venom tropes. Remember, Shrouding Spores. Your opponent must subtract 1 from hit rolls made for ranged weapons that target Hive Fleet units. Well, that range of the Venom trope has gone out from 3 inches to 6 inches. And beforehand, Shrouding Spores, it used to say Hive Fleet Infantry. Now it says Hive Fleet units excluding monsters. So any Hive Fleet unit excluding monsters, -1 to hit, so long as they're within 6 inches. In addition, your opponent must subtract 1 for hit rolls made for ranged weapons that target Hive Fleet monsters if they're within 6 inches of Venom tropes that contain 3 or more models. Increase the range of this 6 inches to 9 inches if the unit contains 6 models. So the Venom trope range got big. You just need to have one of your toes from your units within that 6-inch bubble to get that +1, or that -1 to hit it. And if there's 3 of them, it affects monsters. So like I said, I can see these guys in the backfield, 3 Venom tropes in the backfield next to your Daka, -1 to hit. And yeah, the big creatures, yeah, Venom tropes are good, very good, like them. While we're talking good, let's flip a few pages ahead, because Carnufexes can get enhanced senses, and it costs 10 points, and a Carnufex with enhanced senses has a ballistic characteristic of 3+. So they're hitting on 3s instead of hitting on 4s. And they can take the heavy Venom cannon, which is Assault D3, 36-inch range. It used to be -2 AP, so Assault D3, 36-inch range, Strength 9, -1, 3 damage. But now it's Strength 9, -2, 3 damage at 36-inch range, hitting on 3s. That's pretty good. And imagine they're -1 to hit because you got your Venom tropes with them. So that's Carnufexes. But flipping ahead, let's get to the Tyrannofex, because his big gun got very scary. No one ever took these guys because a heavy 2 gun, strength 10, -1 at 2 damage, and you're only hitting 50% of the time. The Rupture Cannon, no one ever took them because it was 2 shots. Well, now it's 3 shots. And with the Weapon Beast rule, that's good. Weapon Beast rule, if it stands still, it gets to fire twice. So that 3 shots goes to 6 shots, hitting on a 4 up. And instead of strength 10 -1 at 2 damage, it's strength 10 -3 at D6 damage. It's a strength 10 las cannon, people. It stands still, it's firing 6 strength 10 las cannons at 48-inch range. Yes, it's only hitting with 3 of them, but it's a toughness 8, 14 wound tank. I can see Tyrannofexes with Rupture Cannons coming, along with Dakafexes, and it'll be -1 to hit them, and you give them that Hive Fleet ability, which means that they get +1 to their save. What Hive Fleet was that? Oh yeah, the Hive Fleet that I can't pronounce, Jormungandr, that one. So they're standing still in the backfield, so their 3 up save becomes a 2 up save. So 2 up save, big beasts. You put Venom tropes in them, so they're -1 to hit. And they're shooting out guns more reliably. The Carnufexes are hitting on 3s now, and the Tyrannofexes shooting with 6 shots instead of 4 shots, and doing D6 damage a time. You've got a reliable gun line there. A reliable gun line, which would be hard to hit, hard to take down, with range, pumping out some frightening firepower. While your little Gribblies come screaming up the battlefield to murder, death, kill everything in their path. Okay, where were we? Pyrophores, Haruspex, Gargles, Raveners, Red Terror, Mucloid Spores, Spore Mines, all of that sort of stuff. Not really changed. Exocrines, not changed. Back to the heavies. Biovores, not really changed. Teoxocrines, Toxocrines. Its massive toxic lashes have gone from -1 to -2 AP in shooting and assault. And then we're onto the Carnufex page, or Carnufex's Screamer Killers and Thornbacks. So yeah, there are 3 flavors of Carnufexes that you can get. So Screamer Killers come with 2 pairs of monstrous Scything Talons, Bioplasmic Scream, and that rocks them in at 118 points. They have the Living Battering Ram rule, the Monstrous Brood rule, Bioplasmic Scream is 18-inch range, Assault D6, Strength 7, -4 AP, 1 damage a pop. They have Spore Cysts, your opponents must subtract 1 from their hit rolls for ranged attacks that target a Screamer Killer with Spore Cysts. You can buy that, sorry. This is not cumulative with to hit rolls incurred from Shrouding Spores or stuff like that. And the Carnufex and the Thornback can buy Spore Cysts as well, and it's 10 points, so you're going to get them. So that knocks it up to 128 points. And Screamer Killers are terrifying. Your opponent must add 1 to any morale tests for enemy units within 8 inches of 1 or more Screamer Killers. So with their 4 attacks, they're going to get 5 attacks with their Monstrous Scything Talons, because you get 1 more attack because you've got more than 1 pair of Monstrous Scything Talons. So if you don't like your DAC effects and you want something cheap and nasty, relatively cheap and nasty, 128 points, running up the battle grid towards your enemy, then Screamer Killers are for you. Thornbacks have Monstrous Scything Talons and 2 Devourers with Brain Leech Worms. You can switch them out, but a Thornback is supposed to be partly shooty, partly attacky. And they have the Thorned Battering Ram rule, which is exactly the same as the Living Battering Ram rule, only when they hit infantry, they do D3 mortal wounds instead of 1 mortal wound. And Chitin Thorns, at the end of the fight phase, roll a D6 for each enemy unit within 1 inch of any models with Chitin Thorns, and on a 6, they suffer mortal wounds. And Vicious Hunter, enemy infantry units never gain any bonuses to their saving throws for being in cover against attacks made by a Thornback. I told a lie about Spore Cysts though. You can't get Spore Cysts on Thornbacks. You can get Spore Cysts on Carnufexes and Screamer Killers, which is a subtract 1 to hit roll for range weapons. On these guys you can get the Enhanced Senses, so they can be shooting on a 3 rather than a 4. Oh, and Enhanced Senses, by the way, cost 10 points. So then back to the good old-fashioned Carnufex. You can load them up to be a DAC effects with your, what are they called? Brain Leech Worms, Devourers, people like Devourers. And get them hitting on a 3-up. Or leave them with the big guns, the heavy Venom cannon at the back of the field. Shooting that one instead, 36-inch range across the table. Because while we're talking about Devourer with Brain Leech Worms, remember they used to be Assault 3. Strength 6, AP 0, 1 damage. So 3 shots, Strength 6. Nice. Well, now they're 6 shots. 6. So a DAC effects with Devourer with Brain Leech Worms will be chucking out 24 shots. Because remember, it says that any model may replace both pairs of its Monstrous Scything Talons with 2 items from the Monstrous Bio Cannons list. You go to the Monstrous Bio Cannons list, and 2 Devourers with Brain Leech Worms is a pick. So 2 Devourers with Brain Leech Worms, 12 shots. You do that twice, swapping out 1 set of your Monstrous Scything Talons for 2 Devourers with Brain Leech Worms, 12 shots. Swap out your other set, 24 shots. And you're hitting on 3s with your Enhanced Senses. And if you've got Kronos Bio Barrage, if you choose to stand still at some point, you're going to be hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s with 24 shots. Now, the only hope for your opponent is that you're more than 18 inches away, because that's the range of Brain Leech Worms, Devourer things. Yeah, lots and lots of DAC. DAC effects is back in a big way. The thing is, what are you going to pick, really? Are you going to pick a couple of Carnufexes, chucking out lots and lots of shots, or Screamer Killers running across the battle grid towards your enemy, or DAC effects is in the backfield with heavy Venom cannons next to your Exocrines, next to your Tyrannofex blowing out shots? Perhaps a combination of all 3. Get your Exocrines at the back with their 2-up save because they are Jormungandr. Put a Venom Throat next to your Exocrines and Tyrannofexes so they're shooting long range downfield, not moving. And then a wall of 3 or 4 DAC effects walking up the battlefield, each of them checking out 24 shots at strength 6 each. And then a swarm of Ribleys in front of them. It's frightening actually when I start to think of the combinations you can pull off. Particularly when you think of the DAC effects walking up the field will have Venom Throats next to them as well, so they'll be -1 to hit when you're shooting back at them. Anyway, not completely experienced when it comes to Tyranids. I'm not the guy to ask, but I am reading through here. I'm seeing some of these combinations come together, and I'll draw this review to a close, I think. So the main things for me is not a lot of the points have changed. Don't go digging through there expecting to get more bugs in. The shape of your army will change because of the Instinctive Behavior and Synapse rules has opened up that bubble much, much wider. Your psychic powers aren't mean, but they're good. Your relics and your warlord traits aren't mean, but they're good. But having extra wounds on your big creatures and being able to hold stuff in reserve. Gargoyles can stay in reserve as well, by the way, and swoop down off the battlefield. Hive Tyrants swooping down off the battlefield. Gene Stealers hiding in infestation modes and reappearing in your deployment zone. If you want to use them as a counterpunch unit, you can keep them back there with your big shooty stuff. So the shape of your army will change with some of these new rules in here. And they've given Tyranids a lot more bang for their buck now with this enhanced senses rule and some subtle, very subtle, but very strong changes to some of the core guns like the Rupture Cannon and Devourers with Brain Leech Worms. And there's probably a few more, well, there's certainly a few more combinations and a few more little tweaks to the rules that I've missed in here that other people are going to reveal and that you're going to delight in finding when you get the book. I think some of the stratagems in here as well are particularly strong. But that's it. That's my review. Thanks for listening. I want to thank all my patrons for helping to support me. And if you want to support me, please, I encourage you to become a Patreon member. I also want to thank Games Workshop for sending me a copy of this book to review early. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, guys. And to all my subscribers out there, thank you very much for listening. And all non-subscribers, thank you very much for listening. So, happy wargaming.